When Henry Kissinger was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, satirist Tom Lehrer declared that satire was dead. If a war criminal, drenched in Cambodian blood, could be named the greatest gift to world peace, then mockery was impotent. This declaration has been reprised again and again, and the rise of a huckster like Donald Trump to power has seen fresh doubt cast on the viability of the genre. Trump symbolises the death of satire in politics, we hear. Trump is beyond satire, according to Philip Hensher in The Spectator. Hensher argues, "I suppose we're out of love with intelligence asserting itself, which tends to get dismissed as snobbery or elitism." It used to be a source of fun that Alec Baldwin's grotesque Trump persona on Saturday Night Live was, as The Atlantic cheered, getting under the orange skin of the philosopher president. But Baldwin, The Guardian reports, seems to have been minded to retire the character, given that the US has the first satire-resistant president. Even those who are the target of the satire have stopped getting it. Trump seems to have mistaken a satirical story from the Washington Post about his budget, a brutally austerian budget, for real news. This despite the fact that it contained ludicrous argumentation, block caps, and in the author's term, onomatopoeic noises. But how will I survive on this budget, you may be wondering? I am a human child, not a costly fighter jet. You may not survive, but that is because you are soft and weak, something this budget is designed to eliminate. With the money we will save on these sad public servants, we will be able to buy lots of guns and F-35s and other cool things that go boom and pow and pew pew pew. What chance does satire have when those in power feel no sting? But satire has had a boom in the Trump era. The Daily Show and Saturday Night Live, for example, have rarely stopped making headlines thanks to Trump. Yet the content of these shows illustrates why some people might think satire is dying. Back in 2010, amid the upsurge of the Tea Party movement, predecessor of Trumpism, The Daily Show organised a rally to restore sanity. The organisers claimed it was equally aimed at hotheads of both left and right. It claimed that Tea Partiers were not real racists and called for reasonable compromises. Aside from being feeble and apolitical, the premise of the rally was smug. Jon Stewart's comic persona is a reasonable, liberal-minded person surrounded by ill-tempered illogicality. But that only works when you're preaching to the choir. To others, it looks like educated people making fun of the Hicks. The Daily Show has had its moments, being prepared to go places that one generally doesn't in American culture. For example, on Palestine. During Operation Cast Lead in 2014, Stewart was one of the few voices on national television criticising the brutality of the Israeli action.
At that point, what are Gazans supposed to do?
The Israeli military telephoned the neighbour to warn them to evacuate, but they only had 3 minutes.
Evacuate to where? Have you seen Gaza? It's this, Israel blocked this border, Egypt blocked this border. Were they supposed to swim for it?
But most of the time, it was conventional centre-left fare, or, at its most vulgar, a form of what Emmett Penny in Paste magazine calls liberal lecture porn. You sit and watch someone ingratiate themselves to you while they eviscerate someone you don't like, who is in turn unlikely to watch said lecture. This has become worse during the Trump era. In almost every episode, the show will expose or destroy Trump for the gratification of its viewers in the most obvious ways. A typical show might now include such zingers as...
He's also coming up on his first 100 days in office. Yes, and his first 1,800 holes played.
When Bernie Sanders began his presidential campaign, Stewart took to his defence, observing that he was being made to look crazy because...
We've all become so accustomed to stage-managed, focus group-driven candidates that authenticity comes across as lunacy.
Months later, addressing the popularity of Bernie Sanders, Noah said,
I think Bernie Sanders' popularity has nothing to do with policy. I think it's because he's opposite Trump. You see, the world craves balance. Bernie is the yin to Trump's racist yang.
Hardly scorching material. So although there has been a satire boom under Trump, it has, with a few exceptions, like the animated show South Park, been about as edgy as a beach ball. And it isn't just the US. Stand-up comedian Georgie Morell complains in the Huffington Post that Ukrainian satire is also moribund. We used to have Spitting Image, the day-to-day, the thick of it, and then nothing for a long time except a few lurkings from Mark Steele on BBC Radio 4. Rory Bremner, himself once a serious satirist, complains that satire is dead because audiences are distracted by bread and circuses, programmes like The Great British Bake Off. This isn't entirely fair. Britain has its share of current affairs satirical programmes, from Have I Got News For You to Channel 4's Last Leg. They're ultimately rather vacuous, but they exist. There are popular comedians like Stuart Lee and Frankie Boyle who lack the saccharine, middle-of-the-road flavour of their American counterparts. Here's Frankie Boyle, for example, on the most overrated presidential candidate in history.
People say, don't they, say, well, Hillary was the best qualified candidate ever. She was Secretary of State, she was First Lady, she was an attorney. That's not the problem. Peter Sutcliffe was an excellent truck driver.
And there are dark satirical programmes like Black Mirror, which, felicitously, given subsequent news, included an episode about a Cameron-like Prime Minister being blackmailed into having sex with a pig live on air. But what seems unarguable is that there is less of it, and is less culturally important. Arguably, the era in which Spitting Image and alternative comics like Ben Elton were resonant passed because the counter-Thatcherite culture which sustained them died. Consider one of Spitting Image's most famous clips, broadcast on the eve of the 1987 election, which Thatcher won. It was a grim parody of the scene from Cabaret where Nazis sing ominously, "Tomorrow belongs to me." In place of Nazis were Tories and their forward-marching allies, spivs, racist cops, privatisation profiteers, polluters, nuclear maniacs, estate agents and capitalists. It was exuberant but pitch dark, a warning of the locust years to come. Alternative comedy and the Spitting Image satire boom had some worthy successes like Brass Eye and The Thick of It, only to be followed by a restoration of convention. Posh comedians like Alexander Armstrong and Jack Whitehall set the tone with insipid whimsy, while music hall acts like Michael McIntyre offer bland, observational comedy to larger audiences. Nor is it just television. There is very little life in the world of published satire. Private Eye, once a countercultural staple co-founded by the legendary Peter Cook, is now a publication with useful tidbits of information and otherwise formulaic, antiquated jokes. So is satire dying or dead? There's an awful lot of right-wing carping which says it is because, in the words of Ted Gioia at the Daily Beast, audiences today are easily offended by satire and the young demand trigger warnings. There are many similar complaints about political correctness and snowflake fragility destroying satire. Hardly anyone who makes this argument can resist bringing up Charlie Hebdo. Joey complains that the terrorist attack on the offices of Charlie Hebdo has had a chilling effect on the medium. A similar argument in the Los Angeles Times laments that because American liberalism is based far more on acceptance than mockery, it can't accept the ability of Hebdo-like satire to offend. The implication is that jihadi murderers are on a continuum with the snowflakes, terrifying comedians into stultifying conformity. Ian Martin, a former scriptwriter for The Thick of It, gives a more plausible spin on this, telling Zoe Williams in The Guardian that righteous anger has tipped over online into righteous hatred and it's poisoned everything. The fury is no longer directed at those who rule, but at anonymised figures on social media, looped into the attention economy of tweets and viral websites. But surely that just signals a new topic for satire. Chris Morris's The Day-to-Day and Brass Eye were ruthless in their caricatures of the press and broadcasters and their susceptibility to moral panic and infantile pandering. These days, websites like The Onion and Reductress have taken social media and online representation as their subject. The reactionary, ripe for parody columnist Toby Young claims the main reason satire is dead is because satirists are too successful. or from another point of view, have been too successful in their goals, having destroyed deference and having become at least as rich as their politician opponents. He may even have half a point. The days when someone like Peter Cook could scandalise a nation by imitating Harold Macmillan or sending up the judiciary as racist, biased and establishmentarian are gone. But that simply points to another step change. In the thick of it, Armando Iannucci's wildly popular attack on the merchants of spin and political control, the diabolical spin doctor Malcolm Tucker ultimately emerges as the puppet of a malevolent machine that is out of his control.
This job has taken me in every hole in my fucking body. Malcolm, it's gone. You can't know Malcolm because Malcolm is not here. Malcolm fucking left the building fucking years ago. This is a fucking husk. I am a fucking host for this fucking job. Do you want this job?
Yes.
Yes, you do fucking want this job. Then you're gonna have to fucking swallow this whole fucking life and let it grow inside you like a parasite. Getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it fucking eats your insides alive and it stares out of your eyes and tells you what to do.
Is this where satire is heading? Hysterically exposing powerful figures and their buffoonery seems almost quaint now. A throwback to when we could believe that everything was about belittling great men. If political satire has a future, maybe its ultimate subject is not the man, but the machine.